I've decided that I'm going to start doing some book reviews. So I'm going to start today with just reviewing books that are helpful to Christians, books that will educate Christians, help them better able to understand and defend their faith, books that are just of interest. So I'm going to start this morning, and I want to start with this one. This is a facsimile copy of the Geneva New Testament, 1607. So if you open it up, you'll see it's written in Old English. It's a lovely produced book, and it contains. This is just the New Testament. It contains the whole New Testament, and the interesting thing about it is this is the first Bible that has chapter and verse divisions. It was first printed in 1557, the New Testament, 1556, the whole Bible, and it went to 140 different printings or editions, not just printings, not just reprint runs, but editions, sizes, shapes, formats. It was one of the most popular Bibles ever, and it only eventually was superseded by the King James Bible when it had to be pushed out by the King James who banned the printing of this. This book was an amazing book. It was the first book, as I said, with chapter verses. It had cross references, it had margin notes, it had maps, it had illustrations. The King James, on the other hand, when it first came out, didn't have any of those. Was very simple book, and it was very unwieldy. It was huge, and there was some politics behind why the King James came to the fore, and why the Geneva was kind of pushed to the side. Interestingly enough, in England, you could get Geneva Bibles that had the date 1599 on. That was a very common date you'll find in Geneva Bibles. But this is not the actual date they were printed. In order to get them to be into England to be accepted, because they stopped allowing them in England, they put the date so that they were a previous date, so they could get away with saying, well, these ones that were printed earlier, they're not later printings, which is one of those little foibles that you find about some of these books. But yeah, it was an amazing book. It was a very successful book. It was the book that the Pilgrim Fathers took to America, and it predated the King James Bible, and in some ways it was a better, it used more up-to-date English. The English in the King James, even for its day, was somewhat archaic, and it also in places was more correct in its translation than the King James version. Give you an example. In Acts chapter 12 verse 4, it says in the King James, let me just find it, it says in the King James, it mentions the word Easter, which is a bit bizarre when you consider that Easter nobody in the first century would have used the word Easter. So we go to Acts 12:4. And we look up the King James. So in the King James it says, "And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him unto the 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people." So it uses the word Easter. Now, if we go to this version, the Geneva Bible, and we go to Acts chapter 12, verse 4, "And when he had caught him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to be kept intending after the Passover to bring him forth to the people. So that's a better translation. The Greek is actually Pascha there. So that's a better translation. So that's interesting. The King James was very, what could I say, ecclesiastically heavy. It was used words like bishop. I haven't yet checked all of this to see what words are used in here, but it'll be interesting to see, because this was the Reformers' Bible that started, that came from the Reformers. So that's interesting. So I hope I haven't upset any of you King James only people out there, but if I'd had my choice, I would have kept this one instead of going with the King James. That's the first book I wanted to look at. Let's just put this down here. The second book I wanted to look at was one by somebody who I met the other day, by Brian H. Edwards, which is called Nothing But the Truth. Now, unfortunately, you can't get this like this anymore, but you can get it in 6 smaller books. It's a shame, because you've got it all in one book. You could probably pick up a second-hand copy. And it's Nothing But the Truth, the Inspiration, Authority and History of the Bible Explained. Very important subject for every Christian to know. Our authority is based on Scripture, and we need to understand and know the source of our Bible, where it came from, because the Bible is always the point that people attack. The Muslims attack it, liberal scholars attack it. It's always the point that people attack, and we need to be able to just answer people by being able to say, well, look, this is how we know our Bible is reliable. This is how we know we have the correct books in our Bible, etc., etc. So that's a very good book. I'd recommend that, full of useful information. Now, in this book, he mentions this book, which is the Canon of the New Testament by Westcott, of Westcott and Hort fame. This just arrived today. You can get a second-hand copy of this. This is a second-hand copy, 1896. Easy to pick up. This was £9. It's not hard to pick up a second-hand copy of this book. And this guy's been very thorough he's got all the sources, church fathers, and every kind of imaginable source that you could think of is in this book. And that's about the canon of the New Testament. So that's why we use the books that we do. This goes a bit further than that. This is also about manuscripts and things like that. This one is purely on the canon. But it's a valuable book to have if you can get hold of a copy. Interestingly, I was looking up the word canon this morning. And canon means... it comes from a Greek word, kanon, and it means rules, standards, sphere of action, providence, limits. And some of its meanings can be a rod or a straight piece of rounded wood to which anything is fastened to keep it straight. So it means the rule. So that's an interesting look, because we need to understand that the Scriptures are our rule, our faith, our guidance. We go by Scripture. We don't go by anything else. We base what we believe on Scripture. So I think I'm going to leave it there for now. That's just a few hinters. Obviously, getting hold of a Geneva Bible, you can still buy them, but they are expensive if you want to buy an original copy. And I'm talking expensive, but you can get facsimile copies quite easily. You can even get a copy, an updated edition, which is removes the archaic language, so that you can just read it as a normal book. So that's my 10 minutes is up. I try to keep these fairly brief, and God bless you all. and speak to you later.